everyone, it is Jazz here. It is time for the January excerpt reading. You guys put in your votes, and the one that won was Peter Pan by J.M.Barrie, so I'm going to read a little excerpt from this today. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm pretty sure most people kind of have an idea of what Peter Pan is about, so let's go for it and just get into the reading. For a moment after Mr. and Mrs. Darling left the house, the night lights by the beds of the three children continued to burn clearly. They were awfully nice little night lights, and one cannot help wishing that they could have kept awake to see Peter. But Wendy's light blinked and gave such a yawn that the other two yawned also, and before they could close their mouths, all three went out. There was another light in the room now, 1,000 times brighter than the night lights, and in the time we have taken to say this, it had been in all the drawers in the nursery, looking for Peter's shadow. Rummaged the wardrobe and turned every pocket inside out. It was not really a light. It made this light by flashing so quickly, but when it came to rest for a second, you saw that it was a fairy, no longer than your hand, but still growing. It was a girl called Tinker Bell, exquisitely gowned in a skeleton leaf, cut low and square, through which her figure could be seen to the best advantage. A moment after the fairy's entrance, the window was blown open by the breathing of the little stars, and Peter dropped in. He had carried Tinker Bell part of the way, and his hand was still messy with fairy dust. "Tinker Bell," he called softly after making sure that the children were asleep. "Tink, where are you?" She was in a jug for the moment, and liking it extremely. She had never been in a jug before. "Oh, do come out of that jug and tell me, do you know where they put my shadow?" The loveliest tinkle of golden bells answered him. It is the fairy language. You ordinary children can never hear it, but if you were to hear it, you would know that you had heard it once before. Tink said the shadow was in the big box. She meant the chest of drawers, and Peter jumped at the drawers, scattering their contents to the floor with both hands as kings toss halfpence to the crowd. In a moment he had recovered his shadow, and in his delight he forgot that he had shut Tinker Bell up in the drawer. If he thought at all, but I don't believe he ever thought, it was that he and his shadow, when brought near each other, would join like drops of water, and when they did not, he was appalled. He tried to stick it on with soap from the bathroom, but that also failed. A shudder passed through Peter, and he sat on the floor and cried. His sobs woke Wendy, and she sat up in bed. She was not alarmed to see a stranger crying on the nursery floor. She was only pleasantly interested. "Boy," she said courteously, "why are you crying?" Peter could be exceedingly polite also, having learned the grand manner of fairy ceremonies, and he rose and bowed to her beautifully. She was much pleased and bowed beautifully to him from the bed. "What is your name?" "Wendy Moira Angela Darling." "What is your name?" "Peter Pan." She was already sure that he must be Peter, but it did seem a comparatively short name. "Is that all?" "Yes," he said rather sharply. He felt for the first time that it was a shortish name. "I'm so sorry." "It doesn't matter." She asked where he lived. "Second to the right, and then straight on till morning." "What a funny address." Peter had a sinking. For the first time, he felt that perhaps it was a funny address. "No, it isn't. I mean, is that what they put on the letters?" He wished she had not mentioned letters. "Don't get any letters." "But your mother gets letters?" "Don't have a mother," he said. Not only had he no mother, but he had not the slightest desire to have one. He thought them very overrated persons. Wendy, however, felt at once that she was in the presence of a tragedy. "Oh, Peter, no wonder you were crying," she said, and got out of bed and ran to him. "I wasn't crying about mothers. I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on, and besides I wasn't crying." "It has come off?" "Yes." Then Wendy saw the shadow on the floor, looking so draggled, and she was frightfully sorry for Peter. How awful, she said, but she could not help smiling when she saw that he had been trying to stick it on with soap. How exactly like a boy! Fortunately, she knew at once what to do. It must be sewn on. What's sewn? You're dreadfully ignorant. No, I'm not. But she was exulting in his ignorance. I shall sew it on for you, my little man, she said, though he was as tall as herself, and she got out her housewife sewing bag and sewed the shadow onto Peter's foot. I dare say it will hurt a little. Oh, I shan't cry, said Peter, who was already of the opinion that he had never cried in his life. And he clenched his teeth and did not cry, and soon his shadow was behaving properly, though still a little creased. Perhaps I should have ironed it, Wendy said thoughtfully, but Peter, boy-like, was indifferent to appearances, and he was now jumping about in the wildest glee. Alas, he had already forgotten that he owed his bliss to Wendy. He thought he had attached the shadow himself. How clever I am! Oh, the cleverness of me! It is humiliating to have to confess that this conceit of Peter was one of his most fascinating qualities. To put it with brutal frankness, there was never a cockier boy. But for the moment, Wendy was shocked. You conceit. Of course, I did nothing. You did a little, Peter said carelessly, and continued to dance. A little? If I am of no use, then I can at least withdraw. And she sprang in the most dignified way into bed and covered her face with blankets. To induce her to look up, he pretended to be going away, and when this failed, he sat at the end of the bed and tapped her gently with his foot. Wendy, don't withdraw. I can't help crowing, Wendy, when I'm pleased with myself. Still, she would not look up, though she was listening eagerly. Wendy, he continued in a voice that no woman has ever yet been able to resist. Wendy, one girl is more use than 20 boys. Now Wendy was every inch a woman, though there were not very many inches, and she peeped out of the bedclothes. Do you really think so, Peter? Yes, I do. I think it's perfectly sweet of you, and I'll get up again. She sat with him on the side of the bed. She also said she would give him a kiss if he liked, but Peter did not know what she meant, and he held out his hand expectantly. Surely you know what a kiss is. I shall know when you give it to me, he replied stiffly, and not to hurt his feelings, she gave him a thimble. Now, shall I give you a kiss? If you please. She made herself rather cheap by inclining her face towards him, but he merely dropped an acorn button into her hand. So she slowly returned her face to where it had been before, and said nicely that she would wear his kiss on the chain around her neck. It was lucky that she did put it on that chain, for it was afterwards to save her life. That was my excerpt reading of Peter Pan. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this fun little video. And I have left the link to this Mina Lima illustrated edition of Peter Pan in my affiliate links below. So if you like this edition, you can definitely check that out. Like this video if you like this video. Also, make sure that you subscribe if you want to see more book excerpts every month. And click that little bell because it's like kind of like clapping if you believe in Tinkerbell, right? You know, click that bell if you believe in more excerpt readings, shall we say. And that is it for today, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all later. Bye! Wildest glee. Alas, it's not how you say the word.
Yeah, it's alas, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's alas, and it comes out kind of not alas. What in the heck is going on?
I don't know. What is that? What is that?
It sounds like a creature behind me. It's kind of freaking me out. There's a creature in the fireplace. It sounds like. Alas, I cannot say it. I cannot say alas. And so I'm choking on my spit over here.
I can't tell if my ears are ringing.
It seriously sounds like something is in the fireplace.
Okay, good. My ears, between my ears ringing
Oh,
and
that's
the noise.
freaking me out. Okay. So many commas yet again. J.M. loves his cameras. Wendy. Ooh, that sounded a little too